Now a big welcome to our new contributor, Torsten Vidal, who is going to be telling us over the next few weeks about disappearing ice and the collapse of industrial civilization.
Hello, I'm Torsten Vidal, and I'll be your tour guide through the collapse of Arctic sea ice and industrial civilization in the coming months. So, I hope you are sitting comfortably, and I have to remind you that seatbelts are mandatory on this ride. Please buckle up. But first, a bit of introduction. I grew up in Norway like most Norwegians do, but in my teens I noticed, like Neo, that there was something terribly wrong with the world. This brought me to climate activism at 17 or 18. And I was, of course, very much impatient with our politicians. When were they going to act to actually save the Earth? All they would do was talk, endlessly, and their actions never matched their fine words, quite the contrary. And they even threw me in jail for trying to stop a motorway. Enough said, but it is in fact illegal to try and save her, and still to this day illegal to drive a car or fly through the air as much as you want instead of riding your bicycle. 10 years ago, I walked up the slopes to a big glacier here in Hardanger. I had taken a break from climate change for half a decade, doing other stuff like anti-war activism. So when local farmers told me that the ice was 5 or 10 meters lower in just a few years, it reminded me, and I felt guilt for having done other stuff. Once again I had to face the fact there was only fine words from these politicians. They had actually done nothing. Which means they'd done less than nothing. Just increased growth in any way possible, and pumped up emissions like there was no tomorrow. So this has been the case all along. For all of you younger folks listening to this, who think these guys really mean it now, well, they never really meant what they said about climate. Sorry, it was all smoke and mirrors. Through the window on your left and right, you can see the ice now. Looking down at the Arctic Ocean, you see the area or extent that is covered by floating sea ice. This two-dimensional view can tell us a lot of things, but for the real story of Arctic ice collapse, we need thickness. 3 dimensions, submarines or satellites measuring how far down into the water ice goes. The main collapse of Arctic ice is happening in thickness, giving us a total volume of ice. This is the total amount that you need to melt if you are the Earth systems trying to break the ice to flush out industrial civilization. The number one tipping point of global warming is the disappearance of Arctic sea ice. We didn't know that back then. When I chained myself to a digger to halt the building of a new motorway, the late November sea ice volume was at 20,000 cubic kilometers. When they sent me to jail for that, it was at 17,000. This year it was record low and at 7,000 cubic kilometers. The complete disappearance of Arctic sea ice will first be a late summer thing, and a handful of years later it'll be an all-year thing. It will mean that sun rays will go straight into blue ocean rather than be reflected out into space. 4.5 times more of them will be heating the water, and they will no longer have to melt ice. On a sunny day in the last year of sea ice, sun would only manage to make a cubic kilometer of 0 Celsius water from ice at 0 Celsius. While with that ice gone, the 0 Celsius ocean water could be heated by the same amount of sunshine to 4.5 times 80 Celsius. That's 360 degrees Celsius, and of course mixing with colder water and not actually boiling. This is why the loss of sea ice is the bomb. Forget about H-bombs. The liquid H2O that should be frozen is far worse than any nukes, and you can't duck and cover. This is why the question is no longer when they are going to act to actually save the Earth, but when the ice will be gone and reveal the bomb. When you average the volume of ice over a year, we are currently just about 12,000 cubic kilometers in the Arctic. The decline is now so fast that we would lose all ice all through the year by 2020 to 22 at the current speed of collapse. If the speed doesn't increase, there'll be winter ice left in 2019, at the end of this current decade. If hampered or slowed for any reason, we will still be able to see some ice from our window in the dark Arctic winter, even at the start of the new decade. If the previous decade was called the OOs, this current decade may be the OOPs. When will the ice be gone and the bomb revealed? That is very much the question. In fact, you don't need ice to be gone in the dark polar night or the winter in order to release this bomb. It's enough that the ice is gone when the sun returns in April. That will, of course, happen even earlier than the first year of no ice at all, even no ice in winter. What I did in November in order to find the answer to when was to ask my apps a different question. Instead of asking the apps when we last saw a similar collapse rate in the past, I now ask them how soon in the future we will lose all ice with that current collapse rate. I thus created a so-called lag cloud, which is a tag cloud filled with years and months with these suggestions for when. The more frequent suggestions for years and months will have a larger font in these lag clouds, signifying higher confidence or increased likelihood for that year or month to be the right answer. Over the month, I gravitated towards making a whole new graph, using the coming few years as my y-axis. If I say we lose 156 cubic kilometers every month, people will mostly be like meh, not knowing what to make of such a number, or such a huge chunk of ice. Yet when I simply say 2022, that is something we can all relate to. We've all got plans for 2022, whether or not we are aware of those plans yet. If we have kids, we may think that's when my kid will start college or university. Or we may be thinking about retiring around that time. The bottom line is that 2022 is relevant to all of us, and we can relate. Climate scientist Paul Beckwith famously stated that what happens in the Arctic doesn't stay in the Arctic. This isn't Vegas, guys. Changes in the Arctic do not merely affect the polar bears or the seals or the krill. It will be rough times for everyone and every living being on this planet. Further evidence people care when you say 2022 instead of just 156 cubic kilometers per month is when the so-called slowists begin attacking you. That is their way of showing how much they care. Slowists don't want you to say out loud when sea ice will most likely be gone for a day or indeed an entire year. They prefer scientists to tell them after the fact that this catastrophic development was faster than expected. Scientists are supposed to be wrong all the time, and without exception to be wrong on the relaxed and conservative side. Then, when the shit hits the fan 100 years before their incompetent models, they all go, oops, faster than expected, guys. Now, these slowists may be hard to distinguish from the more common deniers, but if you closely study their plumage, there are certain differences. The slowist doesn't explicitly deny global warming. He or she will say that we obviously have global warming. Mostly they'll also say it is man-made. Yet they do not believe we have abrupt climate change. Rather, they believe in a very slow and gradual type of climate change, often seemingly forgetting the change part and reverting back to talk about weather and annual fluctuations determining everything we see in the Arctic. They may even appear to be math deniers. If you say we have 9 million square kilometers of sea ice and lose 100,000 a month, they will be angry if you do the math and say it will only last 90 months. All this is natural and part of the stages of grief. You do the math and you open a can of worms.
Well, all I can say about that segment is it's one of the best segments we've ever had on Extinction Radio. We've had over 60 episodes of Extinction Radio, say on average 2 hours per show. So let's say 120 hours. So what would that be? 120 hours would be 5 continuous days, 24 hours a day of Extinction Radio. Torsten is quite right. If you do the math, if you look at the reality, then things ain't looking good, and I'm so pleased that Torsten is on Extinction Radio. So thank you, Torsten, for that fantastic segment.